Okay, so we're going to continue on. We're going to talk about the second task now. We're going to try to get that nailed, work through that fairly quickly for you, and make sure you're all set to go to get writing on this one. This is a little more involved maybe than the first task is. I see the length of these around 10 pages, 10 to 12 pages maybe. But again, if you just look at the prompts, pay attention to what the requirements are, you do fairly well with this. And I think probably the most common question here is for this one, and again, task 1 and task 2, I don't know why I put that slide in there, is what am I supposed to address? What is it that I'm supposed to be writing about? I hear that quite often. So there is an RFP out there that you can read. That will not provide you a great deal of information. That's why you're in this cohort with me, so that I can make sure you understand what the options are for things that you can write about. The company is the Seamus Company. It is a paper-based publisher, makes language art books, and basically their problem, or what they're trying to get addressed through your proposal, is some way to help them embrace new emerging technologies. They kind of feel like they've kind of avoided that. They're losing market share because they're not taking advantage of it. They want somebody to come in and provide something that'll help them embrace, take advantage of those new emerging technologies. Which would, obviously that would be online delivery, mobile app, things like that. But it doesn't have to be that as a project. So here, let's look at some projects here. Which of the following ones will not work for the proposal?
Rubber band gun?
Yes, rubber band gun doesn't work very well. Any other one? My favorite.
Hot tub with the kegerator?
Kegerator, yeah, which is, I mean, a kegerator is nice, but it really, I've not seen somebody try to utilize that for their proposal. It would be a fun challenge, but I've not seen it. All the rest of these work because let me just step through a couple of them. I won't go through all of them. If Seamus is going to use emerging technologies, then a firewall VPN might be an excellent solution for them because they want to make sure that their new systems are secure and they're not vulnerable, and they also want to provide remote access for their sales staff and stuff. So yeah, sure, that would work. So if you're a security person and you know information, if you have some experience with a firewall VPN, do that one. Cloud migration is good because obviously we see everybody shifting to cloud because, I mean, there's a variety of reasons, but that's another good solution for Seamus is to take their existing, obviously they're going to have digital, you know, everybody has, I'm sure they have their books in a digital format, but to put it in the cloud would provide greater security, maybe more accessible, reduced support costs, blah, 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 blah. That's another good solution. I've seen people do enhanced communication systems that trap the information better than just through the voice. And that was another one. Server virtualization works good because let's say that they want to keep their servers in-house, but they're going to be having a number of additional servers because they're going to launch some web information and stuff. We can talk about virtualization as a part of that solution, you bet. You can also deal with a mobile application that interfaces to stuff. I had a person that wrote one on, they put a QR code in each of the chapters of the book, and the QR code linked to a website that had supportive supplemental information. Perfect. Another good one. Intrusion detection's good. Any of these really will work if you tie it back to the problem that Seamus has, and that is wanting to embrace new emerging technologies. So I recommend you find something in your area of expertise that you feel comfortable with, that you can relate back to that problem and provide the solution. That is what you need to do. Now, having said that, there's another kind of a caveat with that. When you write the capstone report, which is 769, which is obviously the kind of the next course coming up later on in your program. I don't know when it appears, but anyway, you can take, I had somebody write about server virtualization for the Seamus Company. They took that topic, and they wrote their capstone report about server virtualization. They took out the name Seamus, they inserted another scenario, another company scenario, but they actually were able to use some of the information that they already built in this proposal for the proposal for the C769. So you need to keep that in mind. Network access control would work, Brent? You bet. Just remember, when you write, you need to identify the problem, and then, like for instance in the abstract, you write the problem, and then you talk about how your proposed solution is going to help solve or interface with that problem. That's what you need to do when you're putting this together. Okay, so does that make sense? Everybody good on that one as far as this, a topic goes? That seems, yeah, go ahead. You mean when you say a protection system, you're alluding to what? Okay, the RFP gets pretty specific about this being some kind of educationally based solution. When we've worked with the evaluators on this, we've said we don't have education majors. And so we don't want to, I mean, we want to say you're going to have to come up with some kind of educational curriculum-based solution because that's not your background. And so what I've provided here is examples of things that do work. So yes, firewall VPN does work as a subject. It works if you tie it to the problem. So if I were to write this with a firewall solution in mind, I'd say the Seamus company's problem is they have not been utilizing emerging technologies. They want to take greater advantage of it. I propose a firewall VPN because it will help protect those new technologies as they start putting them in place. And the VPN will also enable greater access to those systems remotely for staff and sales individuals or something like that. So you tie it to the problem. That's where we're going with this. They are paper-based publishers right now.
Hey, Joe, I have a question. Can we make a declarative statement for the purpose of our solution? So, for example, can we say, hey, they have a website, but it's not responsive, it's not mobile-friendly, so they should build a mobile-friendly application that works on phones? I mean, even though they're a made-up company, we don't know that they have a website or don't have a website. Can we just say, yes, they have a website and that it's terrible?
Yes, yes. You can build this however you want. There is a great deal of flexibility as long as what you're proposing is logical. So yes, you could say they currently have a very static website. You know, you could say that's a part of their problem. Seamus company hasn't really been utilizing the technologies well. They currently have a very static website that, yeah, sure, works great. As long as it makes sense and your solution ties back to it, you betcha. And I know,
excellent, thank you.
You bet. Let's see. No, you know, Lenny, that's a good question. I would say we don't know a lot about the internal business aspect of this, and so you don't know what kind of communication systems they're using. Some of that you can just go ahead and make up. It's like the question about the website. You know, we don't know if they really have a website or not. We don't see that information, but you can make that up and then tie your solution to what you're talking about. Okay? Good, cool. So everybody pretty well, and this might come up, I might be able to clarify this more as we move on. So let me go to look through some of the sections here, And if we still have questions about subjects, I'd be more than happy to address those. So we'll keep moving. This does need to be APA formatted. And so if you just Googled APA page format, you will find a bunch of information out there about how that should look. But it is 1-inch margins. The first line of each paragraph is indented a 1/2 inch. Everything is double spaced, including between paragraphs. So don't quadruple space between the paragraphs. You just keep going double spaced. Make sure your headings match. So when you do the table of contents, you're going to have main headings, you're going to have subheadings. The main headings are always centered and bolded. The subheadings are always left justified and bolded. And those are typically the same font size, which is 12 point, as the rest of the document. APA recommends Times New Roman, but I see people using different fonts, and that's fine. But 12 is I had somebody do font size of 16. And I said, well, that helps me read it, but it won't go over very well when you send it in. So make sure you're following that. We will look at the format for the references, the hanging indet. We'll look at full citations. We already talked about that for task 1, but I'll spend some time looking at that. And then page number upper right corner is what you're looking for. We're not requiring a running head, even though APA typically uses a running head. You can put a running head in there if you want. Because this is a client-facing document, we didn't include that. But anyway, if you want to put a running head in there, you may as well. So double check that. You need to make sure you're following APA format when you build this.
What's a running head?
That's just up at the upper left-hand corner. It would be like an abbreviation of your title is what it ends up being. In Word, you just go up and change the headings, and it'll leave it creates those as running heads through the doc, and it's kind of a grayed out font is what it ends up being.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, it is part of your header. And you could use a template as long as you make sure it's APA part, and as long as you make sure you follow the subtopics that I'm going to talk about here, because that's what the evaluator is going to use. So I would say grab that tip document, because it tells you exactly what all the subsections should be. It tells you how the TOC should look. Basically, it gives you the formatting for putting it together. So I'd recommend definitely grabbing the tip document and working with that. Okay, so here's the front end of material. You do need a title page that has to have a signature block. Does the signature block have to be signed? No. Don't ask me. I don't know why, but I've seen these get kicked back because there was not a signature block on the title page. You could type your name in and give a date if you want, that's fine, but make sure that is there, and make sure that your project title relates to what you're proposing. I mean, it needs to be somewhat indicative of what it is you're talking about. It can't be a real generic one. I did see an evaluator question that on somebody's, where they said the title didn't deal with the content specifically enough. Okay, then you're going to have a table of contents. Everything that's justified left here would be considered a main head. So main heads are what? Main heads are center bolded, right? Okay, so make sure you follow that. And then these down here, because they're indented, those would be considered, in APA, they're level 2 heading, and they would be considered a subhead. So they're going to be, right, left, justified in the body of the information. The evaluator will look at this and make sure that the headings match up, the wording and the layout of those match up with what you have in your document. So you need to pay attention to that.
Do our subheadings need to have D1, D2, D3 like you've got there?
Don't have to have that. It relates to those as they play out in the rubric. Again, I always believe in trying to make it as obvious for the evaluator as possible, but you do not have to put those in there. you know, there are people that build this totally different than what I'm talking about, and that's fine. Nobody says you have to build it this way. The only reason I recommend it is because it parallels the rubric, it parallels what the evaluator is going to be using, and it makes the evaluation process easier for them. And I think that helps during the evaluation. So that would be my recommendation, to try to stick with these as they're laid out. Okay, so after the front-end material, the TOC, you have an abstract. And the abstract, in our case, the abstract's a little different. Typically, an abstract's a single paragraph that gives a summation of what's contained in the body of the information of the document. This one, you're supposed to cover 6 bullet points. And the 6 bullet points are in the tip document. They're also in the instructions in task stream. I would say make those separate paragraphs. Remember, the abstract page itself needs to be a separate page, but I would have a simple introductory statement, or make the first paragraph a summary of the problem, and then provide the rest of the information. But make them separate paragraphs so it's easier for the evaluator to spot what you've done. If you lump it all into one long paragraph, it's more difficult for them to find it. Yes, the abstract, I wouldn't go more than 1 page on it. What I see is, okay, so here's an example. One of the topic items is a cost estimate, overall cost estimate for the project. I have seen these get kicked back because somebody doesn't have a dollar amount listed in here. So when I review it, the first thing I look for in the abstract is I look for a dollar sign, because I know if you haven't given me a dollar amount for the overall cost of the project, you've not addressed that particular subtopic. So that's the key here, is to make sure you give me benefits, you give me goals, you give me a summary of the problem. You just make sure that you provide all 6 of those items. I'm not familiar with review notes. What, Lenny? Do you mean track changes? Is that what you're talking about? No, yes. I wouldn't do it, because I would save this as a PDF when you're done. That's how I would submit it. So, yeah, I would just make it just standard text. I wouldn't add any of the extra Microsoft junk in it. Okay. So that's what the abstract consists of. If you're over a page, you probably put too much material in there. Keep it brief, but make sure you address all the subtopics. So section D, the proposed project for Seamus Company. This is in my TOC, this was a main heading, so this is going to be obviously centered. And then all of these would be subtopics, so they would be left justified. They would all be bolded, but they would be laid out differently. And here are the things that we're going to talk about right now, are these. Again, these don't necessarily need to be lengthy, but you need to make sure you address what the prompt is asking. Okay, D1, proposed solution. 2 things you need to do. You need to tell me what the problem is that Seamus is trying to solve. And I know you've already done that in the abstract. There's a lot of redundancy here. But write out a thing about, here's the first paragraph is, here's what the problem is Seamus is trying to resolve. And then you're going to give me possibly the second paragraph. You're going to tell me what your solution is going to be to solve that problem. I have seen these get kicked back because somebody hasn't written, or this section hasn't passed because somebody hasn't indicated what the problem is. So make sure you provide both of these. Now, when you write your solution, so for example, I put in here, if you're going to do a mobile application, then you do need to give me a little bit of technical detail. If you're going to tell me about virtualization, of servers, then you need to tell me what you're going to use. Basically how it's going to be built, maybe some of the information about the devices that you plan to use for the Blade servers, whatever. But the evaluator looks for not only what your solution is, they also look for technical information dealing with that solution. Now, does that mean if I'm doing a mobile application, I have to provide snips of what the code is going to look like? No. But you do need to tell me about, okay, what platform is this going to be, how's it going to be built, where will it be developed, is it going to be an Android Studio thing, whatever. You do need to talk about a little bit of the user interface and that type of thing. I would say it's all kind of medium level information or medium to high level information. All right, does that make sense to everybody? Are we good?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So this is maybe done correctly. I know you're all concerned about length. Remember, all this is double spaced. I would say if you wrote a half a page on this, providing technical information, half to 3/4 of a page. 3/4 is a little lengthy, but that would probably be sufficient to cover it. Okay, that's D1. D2, here's what you need to provide. You have to come up with three, and people say, well, this is all kind of hypothetical. Do I have to come up with real sources, or can they be hypothetical too? Which is really a good question. They do need to be actual sources that can be cited correctly and that the evaluator could actually get access to. So they need to be public-facing publications that can be accessed. So you come up with 3 case studies that relate to whatever your proposed solution is, that support your proposed solution. And then you identify, okay, so when you write this up, you're going to talk about, okay, we're going to identify the company. Here's the company. You need to make sure you label the company, identify the company. Then you talk a little bit about what that source deals with, okay? And then you're going to want to tie that back to your proposed solution when you write that. And I'm not sure that is, I don't think I didn't write, yeah, see, in my example, I didn't list everything that person had written. So later on, that individual actually came back and talked about how this source related specifically to the solution for Seamus Company. You need to make sure that that is in there. So you talk about you identify the company, talk about how they used kind of a similar approach to what you're proposing, and then identify how that relates to the Seamus Company. You will need an in-text citation in this part, and that's APA, and we looked at that a little while in part task 1, but that needs to be in there. Okay. If you can't find a specific company name, then sometimes we make company names up. Okay, question? I didn't catch, could you mute your speaker for a minute? Because I'm getting some back feed on your, yeah. So you were saying, run that by me one more time, I apologize. Don't mute your microphone, just mute your speaker. Are we still there? Yeah, I got you now. Go ahead. Now, where else are you putting it? Well, so these sources are talking about Seamus Company, but they deal with a similar setting. Yeah. Yeah, no, those would be fine. You bet. Yeah, I got that. Thanks, Lenny. You're right. Okay. Are we good on this one? Anybody have any questions that I can? Everybody good? Okay. Okay, let's keep moving forward then. Goals, objectives, deliverables. You want to provide a hierarchy here. The goal is, you really only need one goal, which is the overarching, here's what needs to be done, basically what your solution is. Objective is the smaller projects that help meet the goal, and then the deliverables are the tasks that you perform for each of the objectives. So each objective is going to have at least, I always say at least 2 deliverables. So maybe the objective is a project, the deliverables are the jobs, if you will, right? So when you write this up, the evaluator looks for that hierarchy. Now you can do it in an outline format, but as you see on the right-hand side, and this is probably somewhat overkill because it's fairly lengthy, but you need to have some information for, let's say for instance, objective 1. The objective 1 is understand the current client environment. This objective will access the physical, cultural, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So you give me a little bit of a summation of what that objective is going to consist of. Okay, so understand the current client environment. Now I look at the jobs it takes to complete this. The first job is complete a site survey. And then I get a little information about what that consists of. So this relates to objective 1. So you might have, I'd say, no more than 5 objectives. Yeah, that would be too many if you go much more than that. This one had, so this one says 4, but in 5, anyway. But don't do much more than 5 objectives. So each objective will have its own set of tasks or deliverables below it. And again, I recommend one goal, multiple objectives, and then deliverables for each objective. And that's what you'll need to provide for this section. Questions on that? This is kind of a WGU format for these terms. Let's make sure that everybody understands what that looks like. Are we good on that one? Has everybody left? Maybe everybody's left. Okay. I did have somebody the other day just give some sample objectives. You know, you might use this as an objective. You can't do that. You really need to think it out and write down objectives that'll help complete the project. If you go much more than 5, let's say for instance you write 10 objectives, you're giving me too many. Compress them and make it easier on yourself to write this section. So much more than 5, you're putting too many on the page. Okay. All right, good. That's D3. Again, remember, don't just write single statements in an outline format. You've got to provide a little bit of a review, a little bit of an overview of what you're talking about. All right, okay. The timeline is simple. You could start that with a simple introductory statement, and you're just going to use, I say just use a word table. And you're going to put one column is going to be the deliverable, the next one's going to be a duration, project start, project end. And my dates don't work now because these dates are in the past. Your dates must be in the future. So make sure you put dates that are in the future. Your deliverables come from the deliverables in the preceding section. They must match. So you take the deliverables you create in D3 and you drop them down in here for D4. Drop those in, give a time, amount of time it takes to do it, start and end date, those must be in the future. You've got this section finished fairly quickly. Just make sure you cover that. Okay. D5, for the resources and costs, again, I recommend a little introductory paragraph, and then you're going to list some of the representative costs of what it takes to do the project. It does not have to be comprehensive nor exhaustive. So keep that in mind. It represents what it takes to complete the project. You might have labor costs. You might have hardware costs. Just make sure those are logical. Give me cost per hour, total cost per hour, total cost. Give me item, and give me net cost of that if I'm looking at a piece of hardware. Okay, so the table itself is fairly straightforward. The thing that I see people get kind of messed up on is you also need to make sure that you provide sources that relate to where you come up with that information, your estimates. Now, in the real world, in a proposal, obviously you don't have to do that. You just say, here's my estimate because this is what I think it's going to cost. The evaluator will expect to see a source for your cost estimates in this section. Now, I've given one up here in red. That's the administrative, dealing with the labor cost. Here's the site where I went to find that. And this is, obviously, this is APA in-text citation. Down here in the table, I put a citation for the hardware. Okay? That's what you need. Now, obviously, later on, I'm going to have to put a full citation that relates to these. But here in this section, make sure that you provide that information. If I was doing a mobile application and I'm not sure, what the labor cost would be, then just Google it. Go out and say mobile application, customized I think I looked up customized coding cost or customized mobile application cost. And you will find a number of sites that will give you estimates on what it costs per hour to build a customized mobile application. So you can find the information fairly readily out online. All right? Everybody good on this one? You mean as far as like for labor costs or something, or for hardware? Right. Okay. Good question. So you could put it up above in the introductory paragraph. You could say this one talks about media, labor, application development. Then you could put parenthetically an in-text citation. And then you could go on to say hardware installer labor, server administration labor, and put another one there. So you could actually build it into the statement up above. Or you could also list it in the table if you want. Okay? Okay? Cool. All right, onward, forward. D6 outcome. This one is pretty straightforward if you just provide these three things. And again, I always say start it out with an introductory statement or paragraph. You want a metric or a benchmark. Okay, what is it that we're going to be looking at? And this is, I just made something goofy up, but you identify something after the project's completed that is going to be evaluated. And then you're going to give specifics about how it's going to be measured. Okay, in this case, it might be the end of the first quarter. It might be every week for the first 6 months, whatever. But you're going to identify the nature, the process that's going to be used to make the measurements. And then you're going to identify what the success measurement would be, or what the range is, if you will. So it could be increased revenue. It could be number of website hits. We talked originally about the old website versus a new website. Well, you might say the new website's going to have an increase of 30% in access hits, right? that could be a metric that's going to be measured, and then I know what the success rate is going to be. It's easily done. I'd say make sure you have at least 3 metrics and put it in a table and make sure the items are measurable. And if you do that, this section is good. That's all you need to have. Don't overthink this one, all right? Can people give me thumbs up? Yes, we're good? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let's move ahead. Okay, if it's a measurement of duration, you could identify length of time. I had somebody do one that was on a not quantitative, but it was qualitative. They wanted to see how people's opinion of the new interface changed. So this could go back to that web server idea. You could actually send out a survey that said, what do you think of the new website, and get qualitative information about whether or not they feel like it's more interactive or it's more intuitive or that kind of thing. You can identify a qualitative measurement. It doesn't all have to be about numbers. And then for the success measurement, it would say that X number of people felt that it was a more appropriate way for the website to work or something like that. So you can go both directions on it, qualitative and quantitative. Okay. Now, Section E, and we're almost done here. Hang in there. Section E is another main heading, so it's going to be centered, right? And this is basically just repurposing your abstract, because you're going to talk about the problem, what the nature of the solution is, what the project will change, what the benefits are, goals, objectives, why Seamus should spend the money on it, and your company's ability to deliver. Those are all things that you'll find up, most of that same stuff in the abstract. I would say this is a sales pitch. Here's the abstract is, here's what the proposal contains. Here's this justification is, this is how we can make it happen. Here are the things that we're going to provide to make this happen for you. So think of it more as a sales pitch when you write it up, but you will find the information to be very similar to what you put in your abstract. And your company's ability to carry out the project. Okay? All right, so did anybody spot the error? On the previous slide. Oops. Okay, so I said your companies instead of NY''S. So my point was to make sure that you proofread carefully as you go. All right, enough on that. Cover letter. Here's a style of cover letter. You need to have an introduction, a body that expands on the reason for the proposal, and a conclusion. Conclusion should give some time-specific information about when you'd like to see a reply, how you could be contacted, what your preference is, and that type of thing. So I just went out online and snagged this one. So there's a lot of formats, but you need to use the standard business style format for your cover letter. And they don't need to be much lengthier than what you see right here, as long as you make sure you address those points. And this is submitted as a separate document when you upload your information to TaskStream. It needs to be a separate document. Yeah.
You said that should not be included in the PDF. It should be a completely separate document?
Right, yes.
Thank you.
It has to be what, I'm sorry? Right, right, yeah. It would be its own separate PDF file, if you will, okay? So when you submit task 2, you actually would upload 2 things. One would be the proposal, the second would be the cover letter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we already talked about APA sources. Again, just make sure you follow the right style and make sure you have a corresponding in-text citation for your full citation here, whether that's in the cost estimates or up in the case study. Those are really the only 2 places you need to put any kind of sources, is the case studies and your cost estimate, D5. So you don't have to put them elsewhere in the document. But again, make sure that you follow APA formatting and that you have a corresponding in-text for each of your citation. We talked about professional communication before. I'm out of time anyway. Again, you want this document to look good, so you want to check it well and make sure it's laid out nicely, APA. And I mentioned checking the grammar and making sure that you cover the bases there. Check for spelling errors, things of that type, the common things. Okay, and again, you can send drafts to IT TechCom or you can send them to me.
Joe, that was very helpful. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh no, I'm great. Just glad to do it for sure. If you do have any other questions, hang on.